If you're white and you oppose massive non-European immigration into European countries, then you will inevitably hear an anti-white shout, "Go back to Europe." The person that shouts this is completely ignorant to not only American history, but current European politics. They couldn't even tell you the difference between Sweden and Switzerland, or Austria and Australia. They don't know what the European Commission is, or what the EU does, let alone how many languages and countries exist in Europe. And they certainly couldn't tell you the difference in appearance between a Northern European versus a Southern European. But we're racist if you mistake an Ethiopian for a Somali. The people that shout "Go back to Europe," they don't care that every tribe of people on Earth has fought for territory and every nation was founded in blood, sweat, and tears. They don't really care to know who was in America before so-called Native Americans, or that Indians genocided other tribes, or the fact that Indians have a widespread European admixture. They don't care that many skulls from the earliest American Indians, such as the 9,500-year-old Kennewick man, have a head shape that is more similar to that of Eastern Europeans than East Asians. All they care about is making whites a minority, so their group can jockey for power and take over what white people built, because their people failed to do the same. It's based on envy and hatred. We Europeans built big ships, traveled across the ocean using the stars to guide us, and we came, we saw, we claimed it, and we built it from nothing. There was no infrastructure to steal. Europeans created a nation others wish their people could have made. Now millions of non-whites want to come live here and enjoy the stolen land and what evil colonialism built. Funny, huh? So it was wrong for whites to settle the land. But now when they come to live on this supposed Indian stolen land, it's morally justified? So then tell the Chinese in America to go back to China, the Africans to go back to Africa, and the mestizos to go back to Mexico if it's land stolen from native Indians. You didn't spring from the grass of America, and neither did the Indians. So tell North African Arabs to go back to the Arabian Peninsula, or Turks to get out of Asia Minor, or Mexican Spaniards to go back to Spain. But who's the one group that conquered North America and owned it in every way possible? Europeans. Our ancestors toiled the fields, mines, harvested resources, invented technology, worked the factories, and built the infrastructure. They did it. Land doesn't build itself. There is no magical dirt. Europeans were toiling the fields long before the first African slave landed on their shores. There was no USA before Europeans, let alone the concept of legally protected land. There wasn't even a light bulb before us. Anti-whites don't know or care about truth and facts. All they want is to steal what Europeans built. They're petty tyrants who want what they could not build themselves, and they use Marxist lies to try and guilt white people into giving away their stuff. We're not apologizing for being better at exploration and conquest. We're not apologizing for our ancestors who were stronger and smarter. We're not giving away our countries because your feelings are hurt. The only reason why so many non-whites are able to immigrate to this country and any white country today is through the generosity of Europeans. America remained 90% white until the Immigration Act of 1965 opened the gates. Previous laws restricted immigration from Asia and Africa and gave preference to Northern and Western Europeans. In other words, to the stock that built the country. Well, if white Americans ever chose to go back to Europe, then they should take everything they built with them, or burn it all down to the ground and destroy it completely before leaving, and then take payment for what's left over. So when they shout, "Go back to Europe," they understand it's the European homeland. So then Europe should be whites, right? They understand it is our homeland. But they're completely unaware of politics beyond immediate stuff. They don't care to know that Europe is being invaded by millions of non-Europeans. But if they are confronted on that fact, they say, "Good, whites deserve it because of colonialism and shit," while they enjoy the fruits of colonialism. It doesn't matter that Sweden and most other European countries didn't colonize or invade non-whites. Anti-whites see all white peoples the same. They don't know about the history of Estonia or Croatia or any European country. Well, here's the thing. Millions of white Americans would love to return to Europe because Europe is an amazing place, the ancient land of our ancestors. But most of Europe won't take them in. Why? Because they're white. These days, only so-called refugees and third world migrants get in. I know white Americans in Europe who were deported even though they were employed and paid taxes. A Muslim terrorist has a better chance of getting citizenship in Europe than a white American. There are two immigration terms, one called jus sanguinis, which is right of blood, and the other jus soli, right of soil. Right of blood means if you can prove ancestry in that country, you can come back. Right of soil means if you have a child on that soil, you're in, no matter your ancestry. Countries like Hungary, Russia, Ireland, and Italy allow you a right of return if you can prove ancestry through blood. Many European countries used to allow right of blood for the white diaspora to come home. But nowadays, it sounds kind of like the Nazis, so we shouldn't have that. The countries that are currently taking in millions of non-Europeans like England, Germany, and France do not allow the right of return through blood. No citizenship through ancestry for the white diaspora, with one exception in Germany. If you're Jewish and the Nazis kicked you out, welcome. Also in Spain, only if you're Jewish, since they were actually expelled for helping Muslims invade Spain and it took 800 years to get them out, but welcome. The countries that are currently taking in millions of non-Europeans, like England, Germany, and France, do not allow the right of return through blood. No citizenship through ancestry. The largest ethnic groups that helped build America were German, English, Irish, and not in any order, Dutch, French, Spanish, Scandinavian, Italian, Polish, and others. No, 400,000 Africans who came late in the game did not build America from picking cotton. Surprisingly, the largest ethnic group in America is still German. Germans are hardworking, inventive people. We hear Germany saying how German birth rates are low, so we must import Africans and Arabs who will be good taxpayers. Beyond the fact that populations ebb and flow, and Germans would be better off without millions of welfare-seeking foreigners, if Germany really cared about their people, they'd extend an invitation to German Americans. They'd say, come home, we need you, we want you back. But they don't. They do not offer the right of return. It's easier for an Algerian to walk right into the country, claim refugee, and be welcomed by the government with a check. Yes, it is easier for a non-European to get into Europe than a white American. I live in Sweden part-time, and there's no such thing as right of blood. Even though there are millions of Scandinavians in America that would love to come home, they can't. A Nigerian can come to Sweden, have a child, and become Swedish, but Sven Eriksson in Minnesota? Not a chance. Not unless he can find and marry a woman in Sweden and go through a complicated and invasive immigration process. Yet Sweden too pushes the lie that they need non-European immigrants to pay taxes to support pensions. Then welcome back home the Svens of the world, Sweden. France started the idea of the right of return by blood, but today it's easier for an African to have a baby in France and become French than my good friend in America with French ancestry who speaks French. Honestly, the way things are heading in America, I would love for white Americans to return to their nation, their people in Europe, and leave the melting pot behind. I'd love for them to come and fight for Europe. A part of me would also love for whites to all leave America just to watch it crumble into chaos without all those evil white people. I'd love to see white Americans embrace their ethnic roots and reignite their connection to the ancient land of their ancestors. Your ancestors were European before American. These people that you see here are being marketed as the new Europeans. Here's the new German, here's the new Swede, and it's all a lie said by those who want to replace us. They will never be us. It doesn't matter if you're a European mix. Embrace the majority of what you are or what you connect with. Within the word white is an extraordinary amount of diversity. Europe is already multicultural, rich with history and culture, made up of various European ethnicities with thousands of years of tradition to draw upon. We have our own myths, traditions, and celebrations. Our ancestors built the most beautiful places in the world. So when someone shouts, "Go back to Europe," I say yes. Take a pilgrimage to Europe and walk the land of your ancient ancestors. Resurrect them within you. We come from explorers, conquerors, pioneers, inventors, and the most lethal warriors of all time. Somewhere along the way, Americans have forgotten this. Our culture isn't strip malls, toxic food chains, and American Idol. Our culture isn't a melting pot of rootless people who buy cheap Chinese goods. We are Nordics, Slavs, Celts, Romans, Germanics, and Europe is ours. But so is America, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. But if white people don't begin asserting themselves and fight to protect and claim what is theirs, there won't be any place for white people to call their home.
This document talks a great deal about education, but education, by definition, should be about facts. There's nothing factual in what you're talking about here. This is all about opposing opinions and dogma held by a very isolated left liberal establishment over millions and millions of Europeans who detest the mass immigration project which has destroyed so much of our identity. You talk about education. This is in fact indoctrination. The gentleman over there said it himself, indoctrination from the cradle to the grave. This is hugely undemocratic. It's almost a parody of 1984. It's really something quite stunning. You talk about using tax money so that minorities who claim to be offended can bring vexatious legislation against anyone who speaks or tries to speak on behalf of the oppressed majority. You talk about tax money for books, films, television, using the taxpayers' money to suppress the taxpayers' opinions. This would make the European Union a total laughingstock, but it's also something extraordinarily sinister. It's nothing less than an attempt to demonise and ban all indigenous resistance to a project which has already turned our people into minorities in their own homelands. For it to come in particular from members of the Jewish community who should know about oppression, who very strongly identify with the State of Israel, which is oppressing Palestinians in a Nazi-like fashion, is really something quite astounding. This is a genocidal project. This is about propaganda for it. It should be rejected. I think there should be a new slogan to add to the mini-true building. On top of war is peace. Slavery is freedom. How about tolerance is genocide?
Diversity is now, in some parts of Europe, seen as a threat. Diversity comes with challenges. But diversity is humanity's destiny. There is not going to be, even in the remotest places of this planet, a nation that will not see diversity in its future. That's where humanity is heading. Europe will be diverse. Like all other parts of the world, we diverse. The only question is, how do we deal with that diversity?
Quel est l'objectif? Ça va faire parler, mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Défi du métissage que nous adresse le XXIe siècle. Ce n'est pas un choix, c'est une obligation, c'est un impératif. On ne peut pas faire autrement, au risque de nous trouver confrontés à des problèmes considérables. Nous devons changer, alors nous allons changer. On va changer partout en même temps, dans l'entreprise, dans les administrations, à l'éducation, dans les partis politiques. Et on va se mettre des obligations de résultat. Si ce volontarisme républicain ne fonctionnait pas, il faudra alors que la République passe
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
My concern is doing away with whiteness. Whiteness is a form of racial oppression, sure. The suggestion is that it is somehow possible to separate whiteness from oppression, and it is not. There can be no white race without the phenomenon of white supremacy. If you abolish slavery, you abolish slaveholders. In the same way, if you abolish racial oppression, you do away with whiteness. Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity.
Your views are fairly well received in academia.
Yes, they're legitimate, not to say that everyone agrees, but sure. I could not point to any examples where it has provoked political censorship. Whiteness is an identity that arises entirely out of oppression. Whiteness is not a culture, it's not a religion, it's not a language, it's simply an oppressive social category. Blackness is an identity that can be plausibly argued. Black studies is the study of a people that has formed itself in resistance to its oppression. The task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself.
Just briefly, there you are in Germany. Isn't the situation there indicative of the rest of the European continent, where we're actually seeing the EU expanding more and more? How do you now see the future of the issue of immigration developing now across the whole of the European continent, based on what you're seeing there in Germany?
This is a very good point, because immigration is the future. You cannot work and live in a globalized world, in the middle of the world, in Europe, without immigration and moving populations. So you have to really make a good policy of immigration all over Europe. And we see this, that the history of Europe, with this long history of nationalism and small countries, is now getting into a crisis. So this will need a long time to make it better. But you have to confront this. You have to really change the policy of immigration inside Europe. This is very important. You have to adapt the educational system and adapt all the self-understanding of the states. They are not anymore only white or only Swedish or only Portuguese or only German. They are multicultural places in the world.
Annette Kahan, thank you very much indeed for sharing your opinions with us live here on RT. Founder of the Amadeo Antonio Foundation, joining us there live in Berlin. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Meine Damen und Herren, das Wort bekommt nun Frau Dr. von Berg für die Fraktion Die Grünen.
Frau Präsidentin, meine Damen und Herren! Unsere Gesellschaft wird sich ändern. Unsere Stadt wird sich radikal verändern. Ich bin der Auffassung, dass wir in 20, 30 Jahren gar keine ethnischen Mehrheiten mehr haben in unserer Stadt. Das ist auch das, was Migrationsforscherinnen und Forscher sagen. Wir werden in einer Stadt leben, in der es einfach, dass unsere Stadt davon lebt, dass wir ganz viele verschiedene Ethnien haben, ganz viele Menschen, dass wir eine superkulturelle Gesellschaft haben, meine Damen und Herren. Das ist das, was wir haben werden in der Zukunft. Und ich sage Ihnen noch ganz deutlich, gerade hier in Richtung rechts, das ist gut so.
Dort heißt es, die Europäische Kommission schlägt heute einen EU-Neuansiedlungsrahmen vor. Damit soll die gemeinsame europäische Neuansiedlungspolitik festgelegt werden, die gewährleistet, dass Personen, die internationalen Schutz benötigen, geordnet und sichere Wege nach Europa zur Verfügung stehen.
Also Moment mal, Frau Merkel, ich habe jetzt immer was von Flüchtlingen, hilfsbedürftigen Menschen gehört, die also aus Kriegsgebieten fliehen und hier Schutz suchen. Neuerdings haben sie sich, glaube ich, sogar dazu bekannt, dass sie auch wieder nach dem Ende der Kriegshandlungen zurückgeschickt werden sollen oder zurückgehen sollen. Jetzt kriege ich hier ein Papier unter die Finger von der Europäischen Kommission vom 13. Juli 2016, wo von einer europäischen Neuansiedlungspolitik die Rede ist. Und das finde ich doch ein starkes Stück. Also lügen Sie uns hier nur was vor. Ist das der Grund, warum Sie nie von Ihrer Migrationsagenda abweichen? Dass es im Hintergrund längst Papiere und Beschlüsse der Europäischen Kommission gibt, diese Leute in ganz großem Stil geplant und strategisch anzusiedeln.
Und hier geht es auch darum, schrittweise unsere gemeinsamen Neuansiedlungszusagen zu erhöhen. Aha, es gibt also schon Neuansiedlungszusagen. Wem denn gegenüber?
Das ist eine sehr gute Frage. Wem denn gegenüber gibt es diese Neuansiedlungszusagen? Man merkt schon auch, dieses Papier hält sich so ein bisschen im Wagen. Also es ist im Prinzip an ein Publikum gerichtet, das diesen ganzen EU-Sprech schon kennt und das sozusagen diese Informationen, die hier gegeben werden, interpretieren kann.
Der Hammer kommt aber gleich. Zur Unterstützung der Neuansiedlungsbemühungen der Mitgliedstaaten im Rahmen der gezielten EU-Programme stellt die Kommission für jede neue angesiedelte Person 10.000 € aus dem EU-Haushalt zur Verfügung.
Das heißt also, wenn man dieses EU-Sprech richtig interpretiert, bekommt jeder Staat oder jede Kommune oder jedes Land in Europa, das eine Person aus dem Ausland neu ansiedelt, 10.000 € Kopfgeld als Belohnung oder als erste Unterhaltsmaßnahme oder als Anreiz, je nachdem, wie man das interpretieren will.
Die Europäische Kommission mit der europäischen Migrationsagenda schlug eine umfassende Strategie vor. Also es gibt eine richtig umfassende Strategie. Ja, es war ja, wie gesagt, alles rechte Hetze früher, wenn man gesagt hat, das ist eine Strategie, da ist eine Agenda dahinter. Nein, die das dann behauptet haben, das waren ja alles Nazis. Ja. Hier steht es doch alles schwarz auf weiß. Ja. Was hier auf uns zukommt. Ne?
Also eine umfassende Neuansiedlungsstrategie gibt es hier, ja. Und man will also diese Flüchtlinge benutzen, um hier Europa zu besiedeln. Da muss ich mal eins dazu sagen, also Deutschland zum Beispiel, wir sind ja hier nicht in Australien oder in Kanada, sondern in einem der am dichtesten besiedelten Länder der Welt. Also was soll diese Neuansiedlung, wenn ich mal fragen dürfte?
Ja, also wie gesagt, ein interessantes Dokument. Das Ganze wird natürlich von der Europäischen Kommission, von Kommissaren erstellt, die keine Sau gewählt hat. Ja, die sind nicht demokratisch legitimiert. Ja, man kann davon der Demokratie halten, was man möchte, aber es gibt ein Scheinparlament, ja, dieses EU-Parlament. Ansonsten hat niemand einen Einfluss auf die Kommissare, also wer das ist und so weiter.
Aber es ist ja nicht nur die Europäische Kommission, die sich hier um Umsiedlungs- oder Neuansiedlungsmaßnahmen kümmert, sondern es gibt ja auch noch die UNO, also die Ebene darüber. Und auch da beschäftigt man sich mit Migration. Und da gibt es ein Papier, das auch schon etwas Aufsehen erregt hat, von der Abteilung Bevölkerungsfragen der Vereinten Nationen mit dem Titel Bestandserhaltungsmigration, eine Lösung für abnehmende und alternde Bevölkerungen. Ja? Also könnte diese Migration, diese Zuwanderung eine Lösung für Bevölkerungen sein, die einfach schrumpfen oder stagnieren. Jetzt lese ich aber immer nur Migration. Wie kommt denn das eigentlich? Gab es da nicht noch eine andere Möglichkeit? Also kann man wirklich, wenn eine Bevölkerung schrumpft, nur Einwanderer ins Land holen? Ist das nicht merkwürdig? Oder anders gesagt, jemand, der bei einer schrumpfenden Bevölkerung nur von Migration und Zuwanderung redet, aber nicht von Geburtenanreiz für die einheimische Bevölkerung, der will ganz klar diese Bevölkerung austauschen. Er will nämlich keinen eigenen Nachwuchs, sondern er will Migranten von außen. Darum geht's hier. Jetzt habe ich noch ein interessantes Video gefunden. Das ist also der ehemalige griechische Finanzminister Yannis Varoufakis. Mal sehen, was er da so sagt.
Europa muss sich seiner Geschichte bewusst werden. Über hunderte Jahre haben wir Europäer nach Amerika, Australien, Asien und Afrika exportiert. Wir haben kolonisiert, ganze Völker ausgerottet und die Welt übernommen. Und das war Teil des großen europäischen Exodus. Die Demografie des Planeten ändert sich nun. Europa wird nun zu einem großen Teil durch Menschen von außerhalb Europas wiederbesiedelt. Wir sollten das besser akzeptieren.
Also Leute, Europa wird ganz einfach von anderen aus anderen Teilen der Welt wiederbesiedelt und das sollten wir einfach akzeptieren. Von Flüchtlingen oder so redet dieser Mann hier gar nicht, er redet von Siedlern.
We better accept that.